Yeah, boy, it's June 9th, and it's episode 110. This is the Fantasy Football Auctioneer. I'm your host, Uncle Buckets. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/fantasyfootballauctioneer or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight, we're just going to talk. We're talking about a bunch of topics that have come out of our listener survey. So we put out a survey to guys who are on our email list, guys who've been on the website, and we asked them what are some interesting topics that they want us to talk about. And tonight, we're going to take a look at a few of them. But, of course, our experts, they're always here. I didn't write anything out for this, so I'm going to do it right off the top of my head. I'm going to go like this. He is getting the trophy engraved, almost ready for the two-time back-to-back record-breaking, possibly, fantasy hockey pool champs. Blister, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. How you doing? Yeah, you know what? We broke a record last year. We were pretty proud of it. It was established. The pool's 35, 36 years old now. Record was long-standing, I think, and last year we crushed it. Figured that would probably stand put on for who knows how many years, you know. I think the record for the playoff pool was 165. We hit 203. Look, and right now, I mean, we're in position to not only beat the old record, but potentially crush it. If this goes 7 games, it will be crazy. So a lot of fun, made the right picks, got a little lucky, and we'll enjoy it while we can.
And I think we're going to see a lot of his ear tonight because he's potting in a new location so we can watch the basketball game tonight. Slim, is it going to be the left ear or the right ear tonight we're going to see?
Left.
There it is, yeah. For the 6 people who actually watch the YouTube video, so they'll get that joke. Everybody else didn't necessarily get it. Anyways, guys, we got a lot we want to talk about, so we'll just quit with the little small talk and we'll get into it. So if you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. So like I said, tonight we're just going to talk about a bunch of topics that came through from our listener survey. First, Slim, though, you were talking earlier this week. You started up a new Twitter handle.
Yeah, no, we were kind of talking there amongst ourselves the other night, playing with some different apps, and we kind of been talking about there's no real auction community. You know, we do our thing, and we've met in the process the last couple of years. We've met lots of people, average guys that just like to auction draft that are super knowledgeable. So we get quite a few questions and emails and things like that, and I thought, you know what, why is it that people just want to hear from us? When there is so many knowledgeable people out there that we interact with a lot on social media and things like that. So I thought, why can't we bring those people to everybody? Why can't we make a community? You know, anybody that's in Dynasty, we see if you follow, you know, on social media, there's quite a good community out there with guys where people have trades. They'll post them on Twitter and things like that, and just random guys that like Dynasty football will respond. So I thought, why can't we do that with auction? So I created a new Twitter handle at FF Auction Advice, and I just thought, you know what, if you like auction drafting, follow it. If you ever have questions, find a cool link, some new mock draft tool or app, anything, tweet it to at FF Auction Advice, and I'll retweet it to everybody that follows. And like I said, you've got questions. You're in your draft and you don't know who to take. You don't know if this price is fair. Tweet it, and I'll retweet it, and hopefully it gets out to the people that follow it, and you get some real-time answers from not just the 3 of us, but from a whole bunch of people who are just as knowledgeable as us and just as passionate about auction drafts. And the more people you talk to and interact with, the better you're going to be. So I'm just trying to create this community of where everybody kind of helps each other. We bounce ideas off each other, share cool links to things that we find, and help take auction drafting to the next level, and even just improving your own auction drafting so you can beat the crap out of your buddies.
So the idea here is it's just going to be a retweet feed, you follow that, and then people like, so say Slim, you want to answer the question, then Slim for MVP is going to come in and answer the question that was retweeted by, just so we kind of see how it goes. You're not going to give advice right off of there. You just that's lining up the feed.
You're right. I don't want to give advice. I'll do that with my own personal Twitter handle. This is just kind of a hub to process all the auction things that are out there for the masses to hopefully be able to provide their input instead of just at Slim for MVP or at Mr. Blister or at Uncle Buckets. So hopefully we can bring everybody together in that way. And we want to set up a mock draft on a website. We can do that really easy. I'm just hoping we can get as many people on there as possible and really grow it here.
Well, and if you're not on Twitter and you're doing fantasy football, you're doing it wrong, because the amount of information that comes out of Twitter is unbelievable. So this would be a nice tool, like you say, to create this community. We're also trying that, slowly but surely on the website as well. We've got the forums opened up now, so you can head over to the website, thefantasyfootballauction.com, and we're trying to look at creating some community there as well. So advice, again, not just from us, but from other auction fans from all over the world. I mean, we've got guys that listen to the podcast from the Netherlands, from New Zealand, from Brazil. They're from all over the place. So all over the world, worldly advice, Slim.
I know, that's the thing. There's people from all over that we interact with, but no one else really knows about. So I thought, you know what, if we can get people from Wichita with our buddies from New Zealand and the buddies from Canada, we can be the middleman. I'm fine doing that to bring everybody in together.
Okay. Well, speaking of being worldly and fans from New Zealand, we didn't get any Twitter questions quickly tonight before we went on the air. But that's because we had a big email question. So out of the depths from New Zealand, our buddy Kiwi finally has emerged and must be getting ready to do some auction drafting. But it looks like his league's changing, guys. It looks like instead of DST, they're adding individual defensive players or IDP players. And I know that when we started getting into the Dynasty and looking at IDP players, that all of a sudden it was a whole new world to look at, and it can be pretty daunting with all the information that's out there. So he had quite a long email, which is good because we like to hear from him. But the basis of his question was, which IDP players would you target in an auction? And then secondly, he's looking for sleepers. So Slim, I know prior to our big rookie dynasty draft that you've been hot and heavy with the IDPs. Talk to us about what you know going into auctions.
Well, there's a couple things, and Blister's going to get into some names. A couple things that I look for and that everybody should, and he didn't include it, but you've got to know your league scoring requirements and your starting requirements because they matter a lot in IDP. If it's shallow and you're only starting a couple guys, then you're going to want to target the elite names more so. Scoring requirements are huge too. Is it a big play league? Do you get points for kick return yardage? Is it simply just tackle heavy? Things like that. Are sacks worth a lot? Are interceptions worth a lot? Because different players provide different skill sets in IDP leagues, so you got to know who to target in that. And then the last thing, and I think it's often overlooked, is you need to understand the schemes that each defense in the NFL runs because there's so many different schemes and certain positions in these schemes thrive and others aren't necessarily as valuable. And for example, if a team plays a cover 2, oftentimes those are safeties that you don't want to target. They're not real tackle heavy. Are they playing a 4-3 or a 3-4? Because 3-4 outside linebackers will be listed as linebackers, but they're not going to rack up tackles like 4-3 linebackers. So they're going to be devalued a lot. So lots of things like that. You've got to do your research. You've got to watch for scheme changes every year. So you got to pay attention to who's coaching these teams and what the coaching changes are. So it's a lot to pay attention to. Really fun. So yeah, those are just a couple things that I like to look for.
And it just adds to it's a crazy element because you add in this and now your roster size gets deeper and these are the types of guys that make you or break you. Blister, looking at IDPs, who do you look at this year, or what type of things are you targeting?
Well, it was just last year in our dynasty that we decided to do the same idea. We struck the team defenses and went with IDPs, and quite often if you're looking at stat sites or different areas to find stats on your IDPs, you're going to have them broken down into 3 groups. You got your defensive lineman, your defensive end, your defensive tackles, or whatever, probably often group defensive line. Linebackers are usually all on their own, and then your cornerbacks, safeties are put together, and sometimes it'll be grouped under D-backs or whatever, DBs. So that's, I'm not sure in Kiwi's case what they're doing, how many guys they're running, and stuff like that. But when I was doing my research, I looked back at the last few years on these positions, and I wanted to notice, just like we do with our own drafts, what's the difference between the number 1 defensive lineman and the number 5, the 10, the 15, and so on? What's the difference when you look at a DB1 or whatever, and linebacker 1? That's kind of what we do when we looked at our quarterbacks to break everything down. And I'll give Kiwi a little tip here. I like to go to fftoday.com. That's my stats source. I love that site. Little props to them. But if Kiwi goes in there, he can enter his own scoring in there. So once he enters his own scoring format, it'll recalculate the stats from last year and 2012, 2013. That's the nice thing. You can go back for a few years and get a few samples. Last year, for example, J.J. Watt was the man. He was a stud. He was catching offensive touchdowns as well. In our league scoring, he ended up with just over 167 points, but he was the best defensive player in our Dynasty League last year. According to whatever scoring format, the one I pulled up on FF today, he had 193, but he was still the best player last year. So he was the best defensive lineman, defensive end player 2 out of the last 3 years. I would say if you had to get one defensive player on your team, I would target J.J. Watt, and he'd be worth paying a little bit more for. What you notice when you go to the fftoday.com and look at these stats, and you look at the last few years, if you look at defensive linemen, for example, DL, that category, you're going to have a guy like Jason Pierre-Paul last year, who was probably 60 points behind J.J. Watt, which is pretty significant. Mm-hmm. And then the next guy down is another 30 points. So going from J.J. Watt to 3rd or 4th place is 90-some points. That's pretty significant. That's a huge jump, right? Exactly. And then, but from 4th down to 12th, the change is 10 points, maybe less than a point a week. So if you don't have that guy like J.J. Watt, a couple years ago was Robert Quinn, J.J. Watt again before that. At linebacker, again, last year the best player in our league was actually DeAndre Levy. Just beat Luke Kuechly. They were very close. But when you get down to, say, 10th, they're about 30 points weaker, and I think 10th in our league last year was Alec Ogletree from St. Louis. He has 117. So that difference is a little, if you had that number 1 or 2, you beat perhaps some of your opponents by about 30 points. But what you'll notice in each position, basically, if you look at some of the names, the 1 usually has a significant difference from a guy in 5th place and in 10th. But the guy in 5th through almost 20th, there's very little difference. Linebacker stats, if you're looking at your cornerbacks and safety stats, very little difference. If you got that 1 elite guy, that's the guy you want to target. And if you're looking at it over the years, depending on your scoring, linebackers typically will be up there, or that 1 defensive end like J.J. Watt or Robert Quinn who get a pile of sacks, maybe make a couple interceptions, and in J.J.'s case, catch some touchdowns. And if they use them that way again next year, I would still think J.J. Watt, if he has a chance on the offense, would be the guy to target. But the cornerbacks and safeties, their point totals don't ever get as high as your linebackers or those stud defensive ends. So I wouldn't put a lot of money into your cornerbacks and safeties, because I don't think the difference from 1st to 10th or 15th or whatever is all that much. And even looking at our Dynasty League right now, there's guys on the waiver wire that you could pick up and are interchangeable with half the guys that are on rosters right now. They sat at 80-some points, 90 points.
And there he goes. So somebody's talking about he's talking about the difference in positional value, right?
Yeah, no, and he's right. I don't put a lot of stock into my defensive backs, and I don't mean that I don't try and get good players, but when I'm drafting, that to me is a position that I'll wait on. It's kind of like quarterback for me. There's going to be lots of guys people change throughout the season in DBs. Now, you got to watch, are you starting safeties independently of corners, things like that. But, that's all in the scoring.
Yeah, you got to know your rules, like we always say.
Again, to me, it comes down to the first guys I want are elite defensive ends. They're the hardest to come by. They're the rarest. After that, I start trying to pick my linebackers. To me, though, there's a lot less separation amongst them. Yeah, you get guys like Kuechly, Levante David at the top, but I mean, you can put Bobby Wagner in there, Navarro Bowman. There's just more. There's just less difference at the top than there is at defensive ends, like Blister was saying. You got J.J. Watt, and you mentioned it. It's kind of like the tight end class where you got one really elite guy, another guy who's not too far under him, and then it trails off pretty quickly. And then DBs are, not to say a dime a dozen, but they're usually quite easy to find under the radar guys all the time, or at least in the early part of your season.
You can almost stream them, I find.
Sure, you could. Yeah, I mean, injuries have, and that's the thing with IDP guys too. There's quite a few injuries. And with DBs, schemes can change kind of throughout the year a little bit, and there's always guys that emerge. Always, kind of like the running back position of offense.
Yeah. So, who are some guys then, Slim? Now, through all your research, that you would be targeting? I mean, okay, so you got the big names, but are there any of those kind of sneaky guys that you might be able to throw in for a buck or so that are going to hold number one finish?
I mean, well, we'll start with the linebackers, I guess. There's two guys that jump out, and you're going to laugh because I've been trying to get one off of you for a while in our dynasty. But Telvin Smith, young guy. To me, he's got all kinds of speed. He's just going to eat up tackles in Jacksonville. So he's a guy that I'm targeting. And Keenan Robinson is another guy on Washington. Same thing. If you look at his stats, the guy finished with 8+ tackles in the last few games he had last year. No real competition there. He should be a beast this year. Someone who's probably flying under the radar. And, is he going to put up Levante David numbers? No, but to me, those guys are right under there. They're low-end linebacker one potential this year, but definitely high-end linebacker too. Secondary, Robert Blanton in Minnesota. He's never really talked about, and if you look at his stats, he's right up there with just about any other safety in the league, and a lot of guys never even heard of him. And Denoris Searcy is another guy. Tennessee, they typically are pretty safety friendly. We saw Bernard Pollard have a nice career there. Yeah. Griffin. Searcy's the next guy up. So to me, he can very easily be a top 10 DB this year in IDP leagues, depending on the scoring. But and then if you go to D end, one guy I really like is Jarrell Casey, again with Tennessee. Maybe not. Some guys really don't like him. A lot of guys and some guys in IDP don't like the interior linemen. Most guys like to focus on the edge guys, the guys that are putting up big sack numbers. But if you play in just a tackle-heavy league, somebody like Jarrell Casey or even Gerald McCoy, who has been banged up the last couple of years, and so a lot of guys could be down on him. Those guys become really valuable. And like I said, again, when you're doing your D-line, you got to watch the scoring or how they're in your pool, what positions they're put at. I mean, right. An outside linebacker that plays in a 3-4, if you can get him as a D end, that's great. But hello,
we're good.
Right. Everything quit. That background just quit. Threw me off. Sorry. You just want to check out the scoring. You don't want to pick up a guy that you think is going to play defensive end. We saw it in Buffalo. Jerry Hughes, Mario Williams, both were defensive ends last year. Changed schemes. Now they got bumped on MFL to linebacker. Same with DeMarcus Ware in Denver. So you got to really pay attention to those things. So double check your scoring before you draft and see if there's things are going to be changed anytime before the season starts.
So, Blister, any rookies that you would be interested in as far as IDP going forward this year? Like Kendricks, is he someone you're targeting? Is Williams someone too, or what?
Yeah, I didn't really. We just had our rookie draft, and I wasn't really targeting anybody too heavily. I just thought that I'd wait and see how it worked out. I know Kendricks is the name, Stephon Anthony, or whatever it is from New Orleans. He went pretty early on. Of course, it was a Saints fan that took him, but I drafted the defensive end the Giants drafted, but I can't pronounce his name, so I'm not going to bother. So if you look at a defensive end who has a couple O's that start his name, that's the one I got. So try it out.
Okay, well, I mean,
some internet trouble here tonight. I don't know what's going on.
What's all right? We filled it. ISIS. Anyways, so Kiwi, there's some IDP stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it as the summer wears on. He just emailed me, guys, while we were on the air here. He said, no rush on answering because he's got lots of time until it matters. So there's some stuff from the start, and as we push forward into draft season, I'm sure we'll talk about IDP a little bit more. So, guys, the next thing that we wanted to do here, and I mean, we're already at least 20 minutes in, is talk about some survey topics that, I put out a survey. I emailed it out. You can come on to the website. There's a newsletter link, I think, somewhere still, but it's the 5 ways to win, 3 ways to lose is where we're getting a lot of emails from. And I sent out a link to a survey to, the, 700 plus people that are on that list to try to get some feedback as to what are some interests in auction and what are some topics that they want covered. So we got a lot of great feedback, and we said anyone who entered into the survey would win a free membership. So before we get into the topics, guys, I'm just going to declare who won the free membership. So I will post this on the website as well in the show notes so you can see that it was randomly generated, I guess. But I went through a random generator, and this year's winner of the free membership is Donald Shepard. So I'll send Donald a, hopefully it's Don, maybe? Donnie boy? Oh, Donnie boy. No, sorry, I'm going to have to sing. Anyways, Don will... That's free. You can't turn down free. Anyways, I'll send you an email link on how to register for free to the new premium site or premium subscription stuff on the website. I added a couple articles last night. I got another one coming on tonight. We finished off last night too. I finished off the AFC conference breakdown, so those are all on there too. So anyways, Donald Shepard, you are the winner, and I will email you out tonight as to instructions on how to get to that free subscription. So that's one contest, guys, but we do have another contest that's coming up too, and there's a big contest for the 3 of us, and then we have a 4th entry, which is a fan. Blister, I know that last year you were ranked really high in this the Scott Fish Bowl. Talk to us about the Fish Bowl coming up, Blister, and tell us who's in, how it works, what's going on, and then we'll get at the fan entry here afterwards.
Well, Scott Fish puts together a heck of a big fantasy football league. And this year he has 360 teams. So each division is a 12-team league. This year everything looks to be named after Will Ferrell, I believe. Yeah. I'm in the Saturday Night Live Ferrell division.
Nice.
It's a snake draft. It's a slow draft on my fantasy league, and the fun thing about it. It's free to enter, but there are some great prizes, good memberships, and different things like that. Some cash, I believe, still too. But the best thing about it is you get to pit your knowledge against some of the best people in the entire fantasy football industry. You're looking at people from 4for4, Bleacher Report, Dynasty Football Warehouse, Pro Football Focus, FF Magic Man himself, Mika James.
Oh, the Magic Man. You went head-to-head with him, didn't you?
I took him downtown last year. Sorry about that. Number 5, Roto Experts, Rasball. So what we were fortunate to do this year is the 3 of us all played in it last year. We were fortunate enough to get a fan entry. So I guess we'll have a contest now to see what fan we'll put in there. And I was just looking at my division. I have someone from Scout, Liz Loza, Draft Sharks, Kevin English, Dynasty League Football, Ken Moody, Dynasty Football Warehouse, your FF Coach, Football Sickness, Dynasty Nerds, Rich Dotson. Help me out a lot, Rich, if you ever listen to this. I doubt it, but I listen to your going into the. I was like Kiwi. I go out and look for excuse to cut the grass now. To, like,
Yeah,
list a
hold
few
on, me too.
pods. Yeah, so anytime my grass has never been cut so much since I started listening to podcasts. But and draft breakdown. There's sites on there that you might not have heard of, but you're definitely, when you start getting into the league and scrolling through it, you're gonna say, "Wow, that's cool! I get to play with this guy." And I know our fan gets to play in the same league as Uncle Buckets. Uncle Buckets, do you have any names from
Well, I
our
mean,
fan will get to play?
I know that the host of the entire league, Scott Fish, will be playing in my 12-man league. Myself included, our fan included, and I guess another notable name in there is the Fantasy Taz himself. Runs a little podcast there, has a nice little site. So Jim Day is well known around the community as far as fantasy goes. So he'll also be in my division, or in my league, I guess. Slim, how about you? I'm in the Step Brothers League. I'm in the Catalina Wine Mixer. I was
Love that name.
Drop
So
drop the profanity in between, but
Catalina fucking wine mixer. Come on. That's
awesome.
Best.
That's awesome. I think I had that. Did I put that on a graphic on our website earlier? If I have it somewhere, so. I was just looking it up. Anyways, Slim, what do you got going on in your league?
Well, I'm in the Zoolander division.
Nice.
Conference.
Can you give us a face for the YouTube video?
No, sorry, I don't. And I'm in the Mugatu division.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. Anyway, I love the name. Yeah, looking forward to it. I actually got 3 fans in with me, along with Russell Clay, a DLF, Asher Curzon from Fake Pigskin, Jay Myers from Dynasty Football Warehouse, and Kevin O'Brien, the fantasy
Dynasty guys. It
yeah,
doesn't
we
feel fair, actually.
Last night.
To butter them up a little.
Well, no, I'd hate to name drop, but yeah, no, it's going to be tough. But you know what? Look forward to it. It's definitely fun. I can't beat it. Even though we're not big on snake drafts, but this one is a pretty good one. Just because you're going against a lot of guys, there's a lot of bragging rights on the line, and for sure you can
Blister
talk
last
on Twitter.
Year, you got the bye through after the regular season into the playoffs, right? Like you were right there.
Living large last year, living a dream, and then all of a sudden, yeah, big goose laid an egg there in the. I guess I got to buy through the quarters to the semis, and I laid an egg in the semis, and that was it. Dreams crushed. It was disappointing. You think for a free league that you would, oh wow, it's free league, who cares,
Yeah.
But no, it's fun because, like you say, you're up against a lot of people in the industry. You want to be recognized. I mean, it's a pretty big thing. You see all the names on there when you get in there. So our fan that we do elect, that's one thing. That's going to be one of the criteria. A, you can't embarrass us by taking 30 hours to make a pick.
Yes.
And B, you stick it out no matter what. And if your team comes up a dud, well, stay there, play, set your lineup each week, and enjoy that you're in there with these folks. And that's all we ask, because I think it's only fair. A guy like Scott puts all this time in to organize all this.
360 teams.
360 people. There's about 3 fans, so there's a lot of
300 experts probably. Like it's pretty packed.
Yeah.
So to be able to play as a fan in amongst that, it's pretty valuable just for learning experience, and then you make some connections. You talk to some guys and do that type of thing too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You bet.
So we're gonna run a little contest here. My wife was looking. We're buying a new boat trailer, so she was looking for the registration for the old beat up homemade trailer that we have. And she stumbled across some old cheat sheets and draft sheets from 2009, guys. Now, I know we were talking about it a little bit earlier. This is the infamous Blister Goskowski draft. For those of you who are big fans of the podcast, this is the same draft that this occurred. But we were looking at it, and I was just looking at some of the names here, and we thought it'd be interesting for guys to try to take a guess for the contest at a little trivia as far as the auction goes. So in 2009, in our big home, buddy bragging rights draft, there were 3 guys that tied for the highest dollar value. The dollar value was $51, I may add. but there was 3 guys that went for $51. So the contest is going to be, who's the first person out there that's listening, that follows us on Twitter, those types of things, that tweets us the 3 names, the 3 players that went for $51 in our 2009 auction draft. We'll give you one hint right now. Hint is that one of them is a quarterback. Yes, a quarterback.
You don't say.
Sorry, JJ. This was way before streaming was the in thing. So.
And the guy was high.
The guy was probably high too. Yeah, that's probably right. Anyways, so tweet us at Fantasy Auction. The hashtag. So tweet us at Fantasy Auction. That's the Twitter handle. Mention the hashtag Fantasy Football Auction so that we can start kind of getting into this community here too, and we'll get that hashtag rolling through Slim's new Twitter handle of FF. Well, I don't want to get too many. Let's just keep it going. Hashtag Fantasy Football Auction. And let us know who you think the 3 guys are from 2009 that went for $51 in our big home league. The first person to answer that question will get themselves a free entry into the Scott Fish Bowl, the 360-team high expert Fish Bowl. Snake draft, though, but that's all right. We're ready for the snakes.
So right now it is 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. I'll even help you guys out. Every 24 hours we go without someone getting this answer correct, there'll be a hint put on Twitter. So every night, every 24 hours at 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, look for Twitter. There will be a hint until we get a winner.
All right. And then, yeah, I mean, they're big name guys, but one quarterback, it was a big surprise looking back on it. But it's cool to keep that stuff and then look back and see where you were at and who was in the league. And
remember Steve Slayton existed.
So, well, yeah, there was the one. So we were looking at a guy who's in our home league still and in our dynasty league. His highest player was Steve Slayton, and who could be one of the guys. I'm not going to tell you. No, I'll tell you. His dollar value was $41. $41 for Steve Slayton, who I think now is in the CFL. If I'm correct in saying so. So yeah, it's just it's interesting to look back. Anyway, so keep all your stuff. I love to keep it and look back at it, even if it's just for nostalgia. So anyways, there's a contest for how to enter the Scott Fish fan with our fan entry. So anyways, guys, let's continue on then out of the contest. Let's take a look at some of the questions or some of the topics guys had interest in. Let's roll for about 20-25 minutes here, and then we'll get us right around that hour mark. And whatever we don't get to, we'll just keep rolling. These are nice little podcasts for us to fill in. Hey, in between big topics, these are good real meat and potatoes of your draft. So. Guys, let us know what they wanted to learn, and so this one first comes from a guy by the I don't know if that's his name, but Olinger 4605. I won't give the rest of the email address so you're not sending them a bunch of spam about how you're a prince in Nigeria. But anyways, he had a question. The question was, what position is most valuable this year in 2015? So, Blister, why don't we roll to you before your internet cuts out? What do you think is the most valuable position right now heading into 2015?
Oh, that's such a debate, but I think what people are going to go in there thinking is getting that stud running back, especially if it's in a PPR, one that catches passes. And when you even look at the studs, there's a lot of question marks, like with some of them. For example, Le'Veon, he is still going for top dollar, but he's going to miss 3 games as of right now. Jamal Charles, Matt Forte, they're getting a lot of wear in the tires. Marshawn Lynch, same thing. Arian Foster is always banged up. So C.J. Anderson is another guy too that people are expecting big things from this year, but he's still he has Monty Ball and Ronnie Hillman in the picture. So getting a true guy like Eddie Lacy, perhaps Adrian Peterson, everyone expects to come out running with a chip on his shoulder. Jeremy Hill and LaShawn McCoy. I think. Personally, probably that's where people are going to think I can get. There's a lot of depth at receiver. I can go get them. If I don't get Gronk, well, I'm not even going to worry about a tight end. So I think people might be going after $60 on some of their running backs that are in their mind the top ones. I don't know if that's exactly the best strategy, but personally, I think that's a position I see in my mocks, those guys, there is about 6 or 7 that are going for upper 50 in this mid $60 range.
All right. So, Slim, what about you? What do you think is the most valuable position heading into this year's auction?
I agree. With pretty much everything Blister said. Everything that you've heard of, whether it's auction redrafts, whether it's snake drafts, whether it's MFL 10s, the experts right now are really trying to accumulate running backs really early, or else they're waiting until, if we're talking snake, we're talking like rounds 7, 8, 9. And then using those in-between rounds or areas to fill in your pass catchers. So I don't, obviously, quarterbacks should not be ranked highly. Tight ends, Blister said it perfectly. If you don't get Gronk, I think a lot of people are just going to think of it as an afterthought and try and, put some lower tiered guys in there. Lots of depth at wideout. So if you don't get a stud or spend big money on a stud, you can fill that with a bunch of wide receiver twos, hopefully some high upside wide receiver twos, and they can, do quite nicely there. So it's just a big question is how much do you want to spend on these positions, and that's going to be the key, I think, all summer is trying to figure out exactly how much you want to spend on your running back position, because it's going to be key for a lot of other things in your draft. You go out early and drop $60 on Adrian Peterson, then that's going to drastically change potentially what the rest of your team can look like after that. So it's to me value-wise and importance. You hit that right running back this year, it's going to give you a huge advantage over a lot of people every week in your pool.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be tough to figure out which running back that is. I mean, you can spend a ton of money and it's not going to necessarily even be that guy. But then when you look down into the 15 to 20s, I mean, who's that guy?
Well, and even at the top end, we talked about Le'Veon Bell, and I was one who said, you know what, I don't care how many games he misses, the guy's sick, but I saw John Paulson, and I mean, he's one of those guys. All three of us, we have certain guys that we follow on Twitter or listen to, and I think when they say something, they've got a lot of street cred, and you kind of listen to it. For me, John Paulson's one of those guys. He's the most accurate guy out there as far as projecting, and he brought up a good point. He said, you know what, you spend a high pick on Le'Veon. Or you spend a lot of money in your auction on Le'Veon, and maybe you start the year 0-3 because he doesn't play. It's a tough hole now to dig yourself out of, and he comes back and everything. But if someone else gets injured, another one of your big name guys, you're starting with such a disadvantage that to pay the kind of money that you're probably going to have to pay in an auction, maybe you have to second guess that now. And that totally made me change my mind. I was thinking, if I got to pay the same amount as the top running back, I would probably think about doing that very strongly. And now that made me think quite differently. And his context was definitely, it was a snake draft context, and he was talking about spending,
but it still applies.
the 8th overall pick on Le'Veon Bell. But it still applies to auction. You're still gonna have to spend big money. It's hitting on that right running back is going to be tough, I think.
And Blister, and who is it? I mean, you look through the top 10 here, and you go, so is it DeMarco this year? Is AP? What's going to happen there? I mean, I just made a big trade for Jeremy Hill. Is he going to be the guy, or is Gio going to steal too much from him? How do you know?
Yeah, well, that's the gamble. I think depending on when you're drafting, you really have to kind of pay attention to these things. You have to think that some of the guys that had a lot more carries, Lynch's, Fortes, Charles's, there's a better tendency for them to break down. So you have to, like Eddie Lacy being a younger guy and a great offense. I'll talk a bit more about DeMarco in a second, but he's really being undervalued. We'll get to that in a minute. But I I don't know how. I mean, the guy was almost the leading rusher all year long, right at the top, and Le'Veon Bell eventually I think might overtake him. But I mean, he's right there. You're splitting hairs, and this year he's not even being. He's maybe considered a top 10 barely, and I don't get that. So
Yeah.
That's why it is tough, because there are potentially great players there, but then they all have most of them have a kind of a bit of a question mark hanging over their head. So
yeah, most of
it's
them.
hard.
You look at that top 20, and you could put a question mark after almost everybody.
So it's really hard in my mind then to say, well, I'm going to dump 60 on Charles, and I know now I got one back who's going to get all the touches, because
that's right.
It's really
Charles,
scary to do that.
I mean, his age and things like that. Yeah.
So does that make running back most valuable, or is it going to be most valuable? Is wide receiver most valuable? Because you make sure you land 3 big dogs there, and then just pick away at the running backs and hope that you grab a couple that work for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what the term valuable means, right?
Well, I just feel like if you hit the right guy, he's going to be the most valuable to your team, because he's going to give you the edge. I mean, anyone who had Le'Veon, for example, last year, if you were playing against 3/4 of the teams in your league, you knew you had a pretty considerable edge at your RB1 against most guys, unless Marshawn scored 3 touchdowns, things like that. But on average, in a PPR league especially, Le'Veon was he was kind of like the Gronk at tight end, and Forte was in the mix as well and things like that, DeMarco, but there wasn't many guys, and like you just said, there's a lot of question marks on. McCoy disappointed a lot of owners last year and went to may or may not be a better situation or worse, whatever. We could debate that too. But DeMarco Murray changes scenery, gets away from that offensive line, and I think maybe we'll get into that later. That might not be a concern for some people, but it is for others. Le'Veon suspended, AP's getting older, Forte's changing, coordinators. He's not going to catch 100 passes again. Is Justin Forsett this guy now? Is Trestman going to get him 80 catches this year, and all of a sudden he becomes this humongous? I think it's going to be tough. It's a risk to, spend a huge amount of money on a running back, but I just think everyone's going to just look at the list of receivers and be able to pick, 15 guys that they would be happy to have, and I think that'll ease everybody into this sense of security that they can spend on running back. And whether that's right or wrong, we'll find out. You got to still make the right pick. I mean, it's going to come down to that at the end of the day. So,
and then you still have to set your lineup right, and you still got to play the waivers right, and all of those things. You're going to be like Blister and pick up C.J. Anderson and go win a league.
And in the end of the day, at the end of the day, if you wanted to look at one most valuable guy, it could be Gronk. Gronk could. Just because his separation from the rest of the people, if you have Gronk, nobody else does, on a weekly basis, you're probably giving yourself quite an advantage over the rest of the league, because obviously their tight ends are going to have a hard time putting up stats like he does. Like last year, I think Gronk's stats would have ranked him as a top 10 wide receiver. And a couple years ago when he played most of the games and was right up there, I think he would have been the 3rd ranked wide receiver overall, right? That's how good his points were. So when you think about it in terms of that, there's a guy that, if you're going to say, oh, I don't know if I want to spend, Gronk's going for over $40 right now in mocks, and you're going to say, I don't know if I want to spend that. But if I said, well, you're going to get the 3rd best wide receiver this year, I'll spend $40 I'll spend $40 on that. And the big thing for you then is at tight end, you're going to be so much further ahead. So you could look at it like that. Like last year too, quite often, last year my auction team that ended up winning, I had Antonio Brown, who ended up being the best receiver, and I had Le'Veon, right? So those 2 guys were huge. But going into the auction, they weren't, Calvin Johnson and Arian Foster. They weren't these guys that were, going to go for the top dollar. But they were in a good spot, young legs, and a chance to really break out. It's really tough. You got to do all your homework and then get a bit lucky, because your guys got to stay healthy. Your number ones have got to stay healthy too.
All right. So staying with a little bit of luck, next question comes from Kiwi actually. So he's asking about some deep sleepers. Who are some guys for $1 that you think might be able to really hit it off? Blister, you spoke last, so let's go to Slim.
Kind of caught me off guard here,
Sorry,
but no, that's okay. One guy potentially that I kind of like this year is Roy Halou. I don't know if you'll be able to get him for $1. We might not be looking that far down. We've talked about the Oakland situation quite a bit. I personally hate T-Rich, so I'm not convinced that Latavius Murray is the answer, just because he's got some injury concerns. So I don't mind him. Another guy that I like as far as running backs go right now is Ronnie Hillman. It's kind of a mess in Denver right now. Hillman was getting some snaps with the first team. Granted, it's OTAs. But if something happens to C.J. Anderson, to me, I feel like Hillman is the next guy up. I've lost a lot of faith in Monty Ball. So if I'm going to take a sleeper late, then I definitely don't mind taking it on someone like Hillman, especially in that offense. If they're going to run more, let's go with him.
Okay, Blister, what about you? Looking at the $1 boys.
Well, I just looked at some numbers from the most recent mock I was in to see who went for $1, and it's a bit different. I mean, everyone's a little bit different, but guys at the end that were going for $1, not that they necessarily will, but Kenny Stills was there. I mean, he's the guy going off into new offense in Miami, but he should have the potential to stretch the field. Unfortunately, Ryan Tannehill might not be able to get it to him.
Yeah. Shane
Vereen went for $1. I'll get a couple guys I'm going to skip, but I'm going to talk about them in a second. Ryan Matthews, David Cobb. I'm not a big fan of either guy, but realistically, I mean, if DeMarco does go down, Ryan Matthews is going to get a lot of opportunity. More so, he'll still get some touches.
For
David
a quarter,
Cobb,
and then he'll get hurt.
Yeah, Cobb doesn't look like, to me, he wasn't wonderful, but I mean, he's only got to beat out Bishop Sankey, and he could be a starting running back.
The key, yeah.
Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Bradford are a couple of quarterbacks that go late. That could be you look at any quarterback that played in that Philadelphia offense. They put up good numbers. If Sanchez can do it, then Sam can stay healthy. He could as well.
Well, and I like the Teddy Bridgewater. Hold on, Slim retweeted or something today, right? There was a Teddy Bridgewater tweet I thought I saw come through the line.
There was, and I can't remember exactly what it was.
About, like, in the last 7 games, he was QB 11 or something like that.
Yeah, it was something.
And then you're adding Mike Wallace and AP.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's going to be tons of quarterbacks. I think Blister's touched on it. Like, a couple of guys I like, Carson Palmer. I do like Teddy as well. Whether they're $1 or $2, things like that. But yeah, I think there'll be lots of QBs. I was going to say with the running backs too. You mentioned David Cobb, and I know that you don't like him. I mean, you went and saw him live once, and
one game,
but no,
small sample.
And that's what happens though. That's not the end of the world. But one thing with these late running backs, and to me that's the biggest thing to look at is the situation. Who has the least amount of obstacles to get the majority of playing time? And Cobb is not a bad choice because, his main obstacle is Bishop Sankey, and is that even an obstacle? We don't even know for sure. So he might not be the best runner, especially like in this rookie class, but he might have the easiest chance to get on the field immediately. So definitely a guy to consider. And it doesn't matter. Big plotters, maybe not so flashy. Hey, they can still get you fantasy points, and if you can get them for $1 and they get you fantasy points, that's even better.
Sorry, Blister, and I cut you off there earlier. I'm sure you got more on there.
Well, just to throw a couple more receivers, Cody Latimer. I think he's going to get more involved in that Denver offense this year. He's going at the end of a draft for $1. So. And Marvin Jones, guy that 2 years ago had a really great rookie campaign, 10 touchdowns, and last year didn't play the whole season. So he's going to be kind of a guy that you can take a flyer on at the end of your draft for $1, and who knows, he could put up RB or wide receiver 2 numbers.
Well, and I'm thinking even a guy like Malcolm Floyd, who goes under the radar all the time, but finishes high. If Stead and Bailey can stay on the field and has.
Yeah, you picked up Bailey. I saw you.
Well, you know what? I forgot I even had that sitting on the. I thought it had already gone through the expiration date, but just thinking of some guys that have some opportunities maybe to be, maybe not number one, but get some looks, especially in the PPR for a buck.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot of those guys that are going to be floating around, and it's who are the guys deep. And unfortunately, like in our draft, I'm just looking at our rankings right now. At number 70 is Cordell Patterson, but he's not going for $1.
Right.
They just never, right? But a guy like Dwayne Bowe, he might be interesting sitting over there for a buck if he catches a touchdown pass for the first time in his career.
Not going to be a buck. This is like 2 weeks in a row that we've talked Dwayne Bowe. I don't understand.
Oh yeah, that's right. Hey? But he could actually catch a touchdown pass.
Yeah. He could.
Wouldn't that be crazy for him?
Someone should there, maybe. I don't know. I like Nick Toon too. He's a receiver that we got him really low on our rankings. We're all pretty low on him, and I think a lot of that is right now he's the third wideout in New Orleans, and tell me who the last third wideout they've had there that's been really fantasy reliable, and I don't even know if I could come up with a name. I mean, names that come to mind are like Lance Moore and things like that, which weren't really that reliable, but I don't know. I don't think he's got much. Colston could go down, and if that happens, now all of a sudden there's Hill, who hasn't really proven anything, and a second-year player. So, again, what are his obstacles in front of him? And, if he can catch 4 passes a game and maybe a couple injuries and his role increases, he's a sneaky little $1 play.
So let's roll into the next one. This one coming from our contest winner, the free membership winner, Donald Shepard, and it kind of ties in here with what we're talking about. Is how do we identify undervalued players, which ties into kind of those $1 guys. And then I think we'll just kind of cut her there because we're going to put ourselves at around the hour mark or over by the time we finish answering it. And then we'll get into questions. Ryan Dueck's got one about allotting budgets. I really wanted to get to, I love the email address here, Jefe de la Jefe. So I want to make sure I give a shout out there. He'll be coming up in the future pod. But Blister, what do you think? How do you identify someone who's going to be undervalued?
Well, I think 2 things you should do. One, either develop your own set of tiers or come to our site and pick off one of us 3 guys' sets of tiers and look at that, and then go into some mock drafts. And then in the mock drafts, you're going to get a good idea of what guys are going for. Like I was saying, if I get the time, I wish I could just say to my computer, I want you to, compile all the stats for the last 2 or 3 years, average auction drafts, and then tell me, everyone's value and spit it out. Because I think at the end of the day, that if you go into a $200 auction with 12 people, right, there's only $2,400 that can get spent. And there's only so many guys that can go for over $50 and so many guys that can go for 40 and so on, which then is where you find your value. These good players that I've been watching in these drafts that are going for, like a guy like Brandon Cooks or something, Jordan Matthews, for example, I'll throw them out there. Like Brandon Cooks, my last auction, I got him for $26, and I think I would have got him a lot cheaper, but one guy was just trying to run the score up on him. Mm-hmm. But Brandon Cooks has that potential to be a wide receiver 1 this year. And why is that a good value? Because the other guys that are wide receiver 1s are going for anywhere, mid 40s into the $50 range. But so that's how you identify your values. First of all, you need to have an idea of what you'd be willing to pay, and it's only a value if it's a value to you. For some people, they're going to look and say, "Oh, it's not a value. He did terrible on the road last year. You're going to get him for half the games, right?" But you also got to hope that he's going to grow. He was a rookie last year and things like that. So I think you have to. It's just like somebody when we sold our house. The previous house we lived in, that one person said, "Well, that was a lot of money." And the guy says, "Well, we like it. It's worth it to us, So, and that's what it boils down to. You might pay a little bit more for something, but if you like that guy, then it's worth it to you." And I was looking at some of the numbers just from my most recent mock, and like I was saying, DeMarco Murray, he's not getting the love. He's not getting the talk. He's not getting any attention. He's an RB1, no doubt about $42. Now there was other guys like AP and Jamal Charles that were going for over $65 and stuff like that, even higher at sometimes. So I think for DeMarco Murray, every auction I've been in so far, all the stuff I read, he is really undervalued. Guy like Lamar Miller, last 2 years he's been a top 10, top 12. He's been an RB1, low-end RB1, $15. And right now, Devontae Freeman, I got him in the last one for $1. He could go for $4, but he's really not going for much more than that. And so, army worm, gross. I knew something was on me. Anyway, so I mean, it just threw me off. Anyway, so those are a few running backs, but that's what I would do. And then I was looking at receivers. I really think Marcus Colston's undervalued this year. He's going for, last auction he went for $1. I mean, he's not going for very much money. If you get him for if you had to pay more than $4, I'd probably be shocked. But he's a guy who they got rid of Kenny Stills. They don't have Jimmy Graham. They have Brandon Cooks, who's going to get the most attention. Marcus Colston's been around. He's got a good rapport with Drew Brees. He's going to look for him around the end zone. That guy could be in for a great year this year. And Jarvis Landry, he's the only the pass catcher that will be starting in Miami that was there catching passes from Tannehill last year. So that guy, I mean, if they keep him in the slot, and last year he had over 80 receptions. This year he could be huge, and he's a guy $9. You're going to get great numbers out of that guy, and for a fraction of the cost. And I also think Brandon LaFell is a guy. No respect for that guy usually, like he hasn't got any, but I mean, it always takes a long time. If you go into the New England offense, everyone says, "Oh, it takes some time to learn it. Takes some time to learn it." And before the end, he took us right to the championship in a couple of leagues. So he's doing very well. I think he's going to build on that this year. And a guy like Allen Robinson got hurt last year, but he was clearly the number one receiver in Jacksonville when he was there. He had a ton of targets, and I think he went for $4 in the last one. And like I say, yeah, these guys, like when you think about Landry and Allen Robinson and some of the other young, Ryan Matthews is going for around $25 as well, 22, or not Ryan Matthews, sorry, Jordan Matthews. Some of these guys that had really good rookie years, some of them are going to regress for whatever sophomore slump you could say, but realistically, some of their change situations only got better. Jeremy Maclin left. There's a guy in Philadelphia that could potentially be a easy wide receiver one, and he's going for half the price of Alshon Jeffrey or a Jordy Nelson. So that's where you really got to look for your value. Guys that have that potential to be playing at a higher level that are going for a fraction of the cost. Then you can really sit down and strategize your budget and see where you want to pour the cash into.
So,
but it really helps to mock.
Yeah, for sure. Slim, what are you thinking as far as undervalue?
Are we still on how we identify undervalued players, or do we jump to something else here?
No, that's what we're doing. How do you identify those undervalued guys?
Well, I make tiers, and I then come up with auction values based on the mocks, and then I compare the two. And I look for players that are higher in my tiers than they are in my auction values, and those to me are guys that I want to target because they're to me going to outperform their auction prices. And I look for guys that are sorry, I can't remember if I just said that backwards. I'm looking for guys in my tiers that are higher than they are in my auction values. And I have guys that are lower in my tiers based on how I predict them to score points. Then they're lower than their auction value. Those are guys I want to avoid because to me those are going for higher values than what they're actually going to produce. So it's actually pretty simple. You're going to tweak both things. The more you mock, the more accurate hopefully your values become, and you will hopefully start picking up these undervalued players that way.
Okay. So, I mean, and that's good, and we talk about that all the time too, coming into your draft is setting your own tiers and setting your own rankings and seeing that, and then what's going to be valuable then is coming back to sites like ours and taking a look at the average auction values and then putting those two together, right? Like, don't take our word for it as far as rankings. Use them as a baseline, but you know who you like and who you don't like, and where guys are going to go in your draft according to your buddies and what you think of situations and those things too. So I like that idea. How Blister talked your way through it, and then you come back into Slim, who's that little bit more of the analytical type stuff too, and then finally both of you talk about going into mocking and finding out about values. So I think that's a huge piece to it. Anything else you guys want to add as far as undervalue?
Well, I think you'll see this stuff change. That's the thing. You got to keep doing it. Some guy that to me who's pretty polarizing right now. Blister mentioned them as Cooks. I feel like his value, to me, maybe not in the mocks that Blister's done, but with all the things you read about him, and because there is so much about him, to me he's overvalued because we don't necessarily know what to expect, and I feel like he's going to, by the end of the summer, go for sure low-end wide receiver to production or prices, especially in PPR leagues, because everyone is salivating at the fact that there are 200 and something targets that are missing now from the Saints, and where are they going to come from? And everyone just assumes, and rightly or wrongly, that Cooks is going to get a huge percentage. And I will say I assume that as well. It shows in my rankings. I have him as a low-end wide receiver 1. But I just feel like as the summer goes on, he's going to be one guy that whose value is going to keep climbing and climbing and climbing, which is fine. It's going to push down veteran guys. Blister talked about Colston. To me, awesome value. Larry Fitzgerald is an awesome value. If you look at his splits and what he averaged with Carson Palmer under center, vastly different player. He could probably be had for very cheap in drafts. So, I mean, it's just something you're going to have to monitor. And especially with these young guys, they're going to change a lot. And these second-year guys even more so, because, one, we know that they're talented. We have the recency bias where we remember some of these big games that they have. These kinds of players become the kind of must-haves, the marquee names, the trendy picks, and you're going to see guys not be able to resist themselves in drafts, I think, later on this summer, and want Mike Evans and want Jordan Matthews, want Brandon Cooks, maybe even Calvin Benjamin to some extent, because we still think he's going to be a red zone beast. So just be prepared for that. And you know what? Embrace the veterans that are going to come, because it happens every year. These veteran guys are values that the savvy owners always scoop up, whether it's Andre Johnson, whether it's, like I said, Fitzgerald, Colston. There's going to be lots of these guys that are going to go for a lot less than you're probably expecting right now. So be prepared for that.
All right. So good stuff. We went through the IDP guys. We selected a winner for the free membership. We determined how to win the free Scott Fishbowl fan entry. We answered 3 of the survey questions that came in from the league, and we've got a lot more that we can go through with that. So then pushes us right around the hour mark. So I guess just to quickly remind some guys from stuff from the beginning of the pod, jump on Twitter and get at FF Auction Advice to try to start working that fantasy football auction community Slim was talking about earlier. It's Twitter also. Tweet us at Fantasy Auction with the hashtag Fantasy Football Auction who you think were the 3 players in 2009 that went for the highest dollar value. Our hints were they went for $51, and one of them was a quarterback. And then I guess lastly, head on over to the website and take a look at the auction values that are up. Our Blister's got a bunch of those up right now. We've got player rankings going, and I guess the newest and greatest thing that's on our website is the premium subscription. We've got away from the draft kit, and now it's just a paid. We have a paid part of the site. You come on, content's going on all the time. Like I said before, in the last couple of days, I've put 3 or 4 different items on there, and I worked on putting one on there tonight as well. So head on over to the website, The Fantasy Football Auction, and take a look at that as well. Did I forget something? We talked about a lot of stuff tonight, guys.
Well, I think we did talk about a lot of stuff, but I don't have anything else to add. We'll save it for next week. Keep mocking, hopefully.
Scott Fishbowl, fan entry.
That's huge. It'll be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I think whoever gets in will enjoy themselves, because it's a lot of big names, and you can have the gratification of telling your buddies you just took down Uncle Buckets or Scotty Fish himself. So
that's
and
right.
A lot of others. So yeah, it'll be lots of fun.
All right. So on that note, Blister, I hope to see you on the Lynx on Thursday night.
Ooh, All right,
Slim, I'm
all
going to
right.
try to drop by all the uniforms at the high school tomorrow. And for the rest of you, I'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.